We open with an analog video of a well-dressed middle-aged man posing in a children's restaurant. Everything in the set design, plus the guy's suspenders tie combo and wire rim glasses, leads us to believe it's the 1980s or early 1990s. The man addresses the camera, speaking through the douchiest grin you've ever seen. Hi. I'm Scott Chipper, CEO of Fazbear Entertainment. I'd like to personally welcome you to your new job at Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, where fantasy and fun come to life. Thanks to circumstances beyond our control, which have all been ruled accidents, we've been given a lot of time to reflect on our brand, which has allowed us to expand into this state-of-the-art facility you see before you. There's some static, then we catch up with Chipper in front of the stage on which stand 3 animal-themed animatronics. A blue rabbit named Bonnie, a chicken named Chica, and the company mascot, a brown bear in a top hat named Freddy Fazbear. Chipper continues. Thanks to the genius of my protege, Henry Emily, Freddy and friends are more than just animatronics. With state-of-the-art servo technology, Freddy, Bonnie, and Chica can be performers, babysitters, and your best friends. We then cut to a close-up on Chipper, who cheerily speaks into the camera. As the CEO and co-founder of Fazbear Entertainment, I want to be the first to welcome you into the Freddy Fazbear family. What we lack in perks, we more than make up for in fun, food, and remorse for past mistakes. So follow me as I show you the basics of being a good employee at Freddy Fazbear. We smash cut to some time long after that video was recorded. We are still inside Freddy's, but it's not state-of-the-art anymore. It's not even clean. A man in a purple button-up is running down the dark and dingy hallway, clearly terrified, the walls around him lit only by his flashlight. A deep voice starts singing wordlessly from nearby, and the man whips around, his flashlight shining on nothing. He turns back around, and his flashlight just catches something big and yellow moving beyond the far door. For a moment, he's frozen in fear, then he takes off. He runs into the main office, a small, messy room with 2 open doors, and slams his hands on 2 big red buttons, causing industrial blast doors to slam down in both doorways. He hits another button, activating a light outside the window next to the door, and when there's nothing there, he lets out a breath. Getting his bearings, the man crosses the small office to the desk, occupied by a phone, a fan, and a bank of CCTVs. The man picks up the phone and activates a tape recorder attached to it, speaking into the receiver in a falsely calm tone.
Oh, hello, hey, wow, day 4, I knew you could do it. Hey, listen, I may not be around to send you a message tomorrow. It's been a bad night here for me. I'm kind of glad that I recorded my messages for you when I did.
He activates the light outside the other door and is startled by a looming shadow on the outer wall, something big in the blind spot. The man swallows hard.
Hey, do me a favor.
A banging sound comes from the door. Whatever's out there, it wants to come in.
Hey, do me a favor. Maybe sometime you could check inside those suits in the back room. I'm going to try to hold out until someone checks. Maybe it won't be so bad. I always wondered what was in all those empty heads.
From just outside the office, an ethereal chime starts playing.
Oh no.
The man is cut off by the sound of the blast doors suddenly opening. At the same time, all the lights cut off, leaving us in total darkness. A deep moan comes from somewhere nearby as the chimes continue. Suddenly, without warning, all the lights turn back on, and the office is flooded with fluorescent light. The man shields his eyes against the glare, and when he blinks back the lights, he realizes the 3 animatronics are there with him. Bonnie and Chica at the open doors, Freddy standing right inside the office, glaring down at him. The man drops the phone and screams as Freddy lurches across the small office, inhumanly large and strong, his mechanical hands reaching to grab and break. Bonnie and Chica watch, their mechanized eyebrows moving into glowers as they creep into the office on heavy padded feet. The last thing we see of the man in purple is his arms flailing around as the 3 animatronics descend on him. We roll the Season 1 intro, an eerie sequence of lights and arcade machines and electric signs activating throughout the rundown Freddy Fazbear's Pizza. Ideally, the theme will begin with the Living Tombstones rendition of the Toreador March, then transition into the movie theme by the Newton Brothers. In the final shot, we truck in on an arcade cabinet playing an 8-bit style clip of the 3 headliner animatronics performing on stage. This arcade cabinet will have a different episode-relevant clip every time. The image glitches out and morphs into text, 5 Nights at Freddy's. Then the logo morphs into the episode title. Chapter 1: The Joy of Creation. We open in Hurricane, Utah, November 1993. A sedan drives down the cracked and aging main drag in the gold-yellow desert, passing a weathered sign welcoming newcomers to Hurricane. We see inside the sedan, which is being driven by one Charlotte Emily. 21, white, brown hair, olive green hoodie over a purple button-up shirt over a t-shirt, aviator sunglasses. She also wears a silver heart pendant. In the passenger seat is Lamar Miller, 22, black, skinny, wearing a sweatshirt that says Oregon Institute of Technology. Charlie gives the sign a wary look as they pass, and Lamar asks if she's excited. She gives a non-committal response, and he asks if she's nervous. Defensive, Charlie says no, why would she be nervous? Lamar tries to justify his question with some vague generalizations. After a moment of awkwardness, Charlie puts on a mask of confidence and says the only thing to be nervous about is her friends not letting her leave. Elsewhere in Hurricane, a door is opened by Marla Alderman, 21, black, wearing a retro waitress uniform, to welcome in Hannah Appleton, 39, blonde, PTA mom vibes. Marla beckons Hannah in. Hannah is falsely cheery, Marla is somber, and brings her to the living room where another woman sits in the corner. This is Dottie Alderman, 39, Marla's mom. She sits there staring at the TV, not moving or seeming aware of anything. A bowl of fruit sits untouched in her lap. Marla thanks Hannah for coming by again and tells her to help herself to anything in the fridge. Hannah says she's just happy to help and that she and Dottie are going to have such a good time together. She's being condescending and not doing a very good job of hiding it, but she's the type of person to hold herself superior to a clearly disabled friend. Marla grabs her keys and heads out, slipping into a car parked at the side of the road. The driver is John Sims, 24, white, glasses, Marla's boyfriend. John pulls away from the Alderman house as Marla gets buckled in. John asks about Marla's mother, and Marla says she'll be fine. She seems like she's getting better, but maybe that's confirmation bias. Anyways, Marla says, she has more immediate concerns. Charlie is coming in today, and she'll probably stop by the diner. John asks who Charlie is, prompting a look from Marla, and he remembers quickly for his own benefit. Isn't Charlie the one who... he begins. You know, Marla assures him. Back in Marla's house, Hannah waves a hand in front of Dottie's eyes and receives no reaction. She flops down on the couch and picks up the phone receiver, dialing a number. As it rings, she reaches over and grabs a piece of fruit from Dottie's bowl. Outside another Hurricane house, Charlie and Lamar sit in the car. Charlie psychs herself up to go inside, and Lamar asks if she's sure her aunt even wants to see her. Charlie says sure she's sure. If her aunt didn't want to see her, she wouldn't send her $5 every birthday. Jen Emily, 52, short hair, very tough, opens the door to find her estranged niece carrying luggage. Charlie pushes her way inside, greeting her aunt, and begins reminiscing about her childhood home. Jen is caught off guard as Charlie ingratiates herself. She goes upstairs to her childhood room, saying that she'd forgotten what it looked like. She becomes somber when she finds her old toys, including a purple rabbit plush named Theodore, and a mechanical unicorn on a track, both created by her roboticist father. Charlie asks what happened to her stuffed tiger, but Jen doesn't remember her having one. Charlie doesn't remember having bunk beds, and Jen tells her she would have graduated to the top bunk if she hadn't moved away. Pushing through Charlie's filibustering, Jen asks what she's doing here, and Charlie finally says she needed a break from school, and plus, she wanted to be here for the memorial. Jen acts suspicious, asking if Charlie's foster parents know she's here, and Charlie reminds her that she's an adult. Jen pointedly asks where she'll be staying, and Charlie pointedly says she'd like to stay here, since it should be her house anyways. Yeah, she tells Jen, she knows about her father's secret will. Jen says that unless Charlie has this alleged secret will with her, this house is hers. Charlie says she won't beg, and Jen says she doesn't want her to. She just suspects that Charlie has ulterior reasons for being here, and she wants to stop her from getting hurt. Jen suggests she go stay with Marla, and Charlie angrily says she just might. She goes to leave, but Jen stops her to give her Theodore. He wasn't in the will, obviously, but she knows Charlie's father wanted Charlie to have him. Charlie gets back in the car, and Lamar asks how it went. Charlie says they might have to spend their snack money on a motel, but at least she knows where they can get some coffee. We cut to inside Sparky's, a local diner with 50s vibes. It's not retro, it's just never been modernized. The middle-aged owner, Norma, comes out to greet a pair of customers settling in at the bar. A 50-something man and a 50-something woman. The woman looks like your average mom, but the guy has bright blue hair and a green beard and a braid. Norma greets them as Dare and Hillary, their siblings, and asks how's construction. Dare says it'll be a lot easier once he figures out how to do it from home. Elsewhere in Sparky's, Marla Alderman stops by a booth to check on the single patron, Carlton Burke. Carlton is 21, pale, ginger, wearing a black muscle shirt despite his lack of muscles. Marla asks if Carlton wants more juice, noting that she's surprised he hasn't ordered any food. Carlton says he's probably nervous. Marla says it's possible Charlie won't even come by. Carlton looks over the menu, disinterested, and finally asks who Percy Shelley is. Marla says he was a poet. Carlton asks why does Sparky's have a dish named after him. Marla says the Percy Shelley is mac and cheese. Shell mac and cheese, specifically. It's a play on words. Carlton says that only works as a play on words if Percy Shelley has anything to do with Sparky's, which he doesn't. Marla says now that she thinks about it, she actually thinks Shelley may have been the name of the guy who started Sparky's, but that was a long time ago. Their conversation is cut short by the door chime and a voice calling out to them. Charlie is entering the diner, Lamar trailing behind, and Charlie puts on a pretty obviously feigned show of excitement as she hugs Marla. This prompts a glance from Dare and Hillary, who immediately go back to their coffee. We now see that John is sitting at the bar using the corded phone. When he notices Charlie and Lamar entering, he hangs up and goes into the bathroom. Charlie introduces Lamar to Carlton, then Marla, except she calls her Marta. Marla corrects her, and suddenly the air is awkward. Marla goes to get some coffee for the table. Trying for levity, Charlie sits down and asks Carlton if he still smells like feet. He's confused for a second, then laughs, a little nervously, explaining to Lamar that Marla once graffitied this sentiment on the side of a building. Charlie says that Carlton at least smelled good compared to Marla's little brother. This causes Carlton to choke on his juice, and he changes the subject, asking Lamar what he's doing here. As Lamar explains that he's researching for his dissertation, Charlie notices John coming out of the bathroom and approaching Marla. They kiss and say a few inaudible words, then John heads for the door, pausing at the booth. Lamar falls silent as John greets Charlie, asking if she remembers him. She isn't sure, so he introduces himself as John Sims. Charlie remembers his mother, her former babysitter, and asks about her. John says she passed away from breast cancer a couple years ago, and Charlie gives her condolences. John asks what she's doing here, prompting a consternated look from Marla across the room. Charlie says she's just visiting. Unable to think of anything else to say, John tells Charlie it was great to see her, offering a fist bump. He calls to Marla across the diner, saying he'll pick her up at 6, then he heads out. Charlie tells Carlton she barely remembers John. Was he part of their group? Carlton says no, he was a few years older, way too cool to hang out with them. Picking up an old memory, Charlie asks if John was friends with Michael Afton. Carlton says he doesn't think so, and quickly asks Lamar what his dissertation is about. Lamar says it's mainly about Charlie's father. He's here to see Freddy Fazbear's in person. Carlton's eyes go wide, and behind the bar, Marla and the other waitress freeze to glance at them. Norma makes a move towards their booth, but Marla holds up a hand. She thinks it's okay, and for some reason, Norma takes her direction. Lamar is asking what he did wrong, and Charlie comes to Carlton's defense. It's just small-town rumors, she says. Kids used to make up stories about the animatronics coming to life at night. Yeah, Carlton agrees. You know how these local stories come and go. Some people never grow out of whatever scared them as little kids. Lamar nods in understanding, but Charlie looks contemplative. She asks Carlton whatever happened to Freddy's, and he says it's still open, but not for long. We cut to outside Freddy Fazbear's Pizza, a business on its last legs. It's a squat brick building in a faded parking lot sprouting weeds from every crack. There are maybe 3 cars visible. Below the neon open sign, someone has spray painted the word again. A giant sheet metal Freddy Fazbear looms over the door, lazily waving a hand back and forth, beckoning in the crowds that no longer come. We pull into Freddy's face, then jump cut to the real thing. Freddy Fazbear himself, eyebrows down, eyes half closed. He looks just like he did when he killed the guy in purple. Compared to the years-old training video, his head is rounder and he's lost the buttons down his torso, though he retains his black top hat and bow tie. We pull back and reveal Chica and Bonnie, the former holding a platter with an animatronic cupcake and the latter holding his electric guitar. They've also changed a little since the training video. Bonnie is missing his buttons and whiskers, and he's closer to purple than blue now. Chica's beak is significantly smaller. As we pull back through a now-opening curtain, music begins and the animatronics come to life, moving in a predetermined cycle, jaws and eyebrows going up and down in time with the music. Freddy moves his mic to and from his mouth. Bonnie's paws move up and down, inches away from his guitar's empty fretboard. We see that there's only 2 people in the main dining room, and they're both watching the animatronics. A little boy sitting alone at a table, and a guy in his 20s standing up, staring in consternation. This is Mike Schmidt, an average-looking white 24-year-old with blue eyes. After a few bars of the song, Mike is approached by Phil Brooks, the manager of Freddy's, a guy in his late 30s. They introduce themselves, and Phil asks Mike if he's enjoying the show. Mike says the animatronics movement is surprisingly smooth. Phil asks if Mike ever came to Freddy's as a kid, and he says no, he didn't grow up in Utah. Phil asks if he's ready for his orientation, then leads him away. Charlie and Lamar are leaving Sparky's in their car when Carlton appears at the driver's side window. He awkwardly tells Charlie that he and Marla will understand if she doesn't want to go to the memorial, prompting a confused look from Lamar. Charlie puts Carlton on the spot, asking why he thinks she wouldn't want to go, and he can't answer. Charlie says she'll be there, and starts backing up, leaving Carlton alone in the parking lot. Carlton finds Marla behind the diner, smoking a cigarette. He says Charlie is definitely going, and Marla says she expected that. She says they should try to get her out of town before the memorial, and if they can't, they should get her out as soon as possible. She asks if Carlton's dad is keeping an eye on her, and Carlton reminds her she told him not to tell his dad Charlie was in town. She says good. That was a test. Charlie and Lamar park outside a rundown motel on the outskirts of Hurricane. Lamar asks if she's coming, and she says she's going to drive around for a while. Hesitantly, Lamar asks about this memorial, and Charlie says it's just for a kid who died 10 years ago this month. Lamar asks if that's why she came back, and Charlie says the memorial's just a coincidence. She's here to help him with his dissertation. He reminds her that she didn't even know whether Freddy's was still open, and she says she would have known where to find the animatronics if it wasn't. Charlie assures Lamar that she wouldn't drag him all the way to Utah for her own personal agenda, but Lamar doesn't look convinced. As he gets out of the car, Charlie tells him to get a room with 2 beds. Things aren't looking good with Aunt Jen. Lamar waits at the desk in the empty motel office. He stands there for a while, bouncing in boredom, wishing he didn't live before the invention of smartphones. After a while, he knocks on the plastic slider, and finally someone shows up. A rough-looking blonde guy who's not even 30, but has definitely seen some shit and done some drugs. He looks surprised at Lamar's presence, and Lamar cautiously asks if he can rent a room. The guy says he's just the super, but it looks like the manager didn't bother coming in today, so he looks through the folder. Lamar asks if there's a hotel in town stealing their business, and the super says no, they just don't get many visitors. Anywhere in Hurricane. As the super flips through the book, Lamar notices his left arm. He's missing his middle finger, and there's a massive scar tissue on his forearm in a jagged formation. Maybe it was a workplace accident, or maybe he survived a shark attack. The super finally finds a room, one that has been cleaned in the last month, and quotes Lamar a 1993 price. Lamar hands him $100, and as the guy counts out his change, Lamar asks if he can ask him a question. The super eyes him suspiciously, and when he doesn't say no, Lamar asks if he grew up in Hurricane. The super says he really didn't need permission to ask that, and Lamar says what he really means is, what does he think about Freddy Fazbears? At that, the super takes a moment to collect his thoughts, obviously not wanting to reply. He hands Lamar his change, then a key, and says whatever's going on here, he doesn't want to know about it. But if Lamar knows what's good for him, he'll stay away from Freddy's. Lamar says he's here for academic purposes, he just wants to see how the animatronics work. The super says that's his mistake. They're not animatronics. They're vehicles, being driven by the devil himself. Phil and Mike sit in the office at Freddy's, right where the man in purple died. Phil says he thinks Mike understands the procedure, and thanks him again for coming in on short notice. He asks if Mike has any questions, and Mike says, yeah, what's with the reinforced doors? Phil says the doors are heavy duty for the same reason there's 2 of them, in case of emergency. Fire, Phil says. Obviously, there aren't many other causes for concern in an establishment such as this. But keeping the blast doors shut does use up a lot of electricity, so it's important to only use them if necessary. Phil tells Mike to be here at 11 p.m. sharp and hands him his new uniform. Black slacks, a purple button-up, a purple tie, a purple cap, and a plastic badge. Phil says he's heading out for the day. He has a hot date. But the last night guard recorded some training sessions on cassette, and Phil will leave them here. He suggests Mike go take a nap. It's time to get used to being nocturnal. On his way out of Freddy's, Mike notices the little boy from earlier poking at a gumball machine shaped like a retro robot tucked away by the front door. In a monotone voice, the robot tells the kid,
I am a candy cadet. Come get your candy here. I have candy all day, every day. Candy, candy, candy.
Purple lights flash up and down its sides. "Did you get some candy?" Mike asks the kid. The kid says he doesn't have a quarter, so Mike gives him one. He slips the quarter into the robot and his candy slot opens, but nothing comes out.
"Return to Candy Cadet again,"
the robot says.
"and maybe I will tell you a story."
What a ripoff, the kid sneers. Glancing over his shoulder, Mike leans in and gives the kid 2 pieces of grown-up advice. Everything in life is a ripoff, and stay away from Freddy Fazbears. At a rundown mechanics next to a gas station, John is under a car on a lift, checking the brake pads as the oil drains. His manager, a heavy guy named Rocket Jim, pokes his head into the shop and tells John that the customer won't shell out for new tie rods if there's no visible damage. John says it doesn't matter if there's visible damage, they're about 2 potholes away from giving out completely. Rocket Jim says if they were up north, they could dock him a safety sticker, but if it doesn't break the emissions test, they can't stop him from taking it on the road. John says the guy could kill someone if his steering blows out, and Rocket Jim says they can't force him to buy new parts. John asks if Rocket Jim can stall the customer for a minute and tell them they've only checked the rear tie rods. Rocket Jim says there's no such thing as rear tie rods, and John tells him the customer probably doesn't know that. Rocket Jim says whatever and leaves. John replaces the oil cap, then grabs a mallet and swings it hard at one of the tie rods. While he's wailing on it, someone on a motorcycle pulls up and parks outside the open garage door. John wipes his hands on a rag and goes out to meet the guy, a bearded biker type named Steve D'Agostino, 50s or 60s. Steve turns off his motorcycle and says hi to John, asking if he can get some air. John grabs the air hose and drags it out of the garage, kneeling down to pump Steve's tires full. As John holds the nozzle, Steve says he came up with some new ideas for the story. John clearly doesn't want to have this conversation, but he asks what. Steve, still sitting on his bike, tells John he thinks the mom should be dead the whole time. He clarifies. At the end of John's story, the main character's mom, one of the central characters, should be revealed to have been a ghost all along. As John moves on to the back tire, he asks Steve what purpose that would serve, and Steve says it would be a surprise. John says he wouldn't be able to fit it with the rest of the story. And anyways, it would feel wrong to shoehorn in a supernatural element when the rest of the story has been pretty grounded. John stands up, done filling the tires, and Steve says that's why it would be a great twist. No one would see it coming. John says sometimes you don't need a twist. Sometimes a good story plays out exactly as the reader expects it to. Steve asks how you can enjoy a story if you know what's going to happen, and John says it's about the journey, not the destination, asking Steve if he rides his motorcycle just to get places or because he enjoys riding it. Steve says, okay, that kind of makes sense. So maybe the mom can be a ghost from the beginning? John says he'll think about it. He won't think about it, and heads back to the garage. Rocket Jim appears from the office and says the customer figured out there's no such thing as a rear tie rod, and John says that's fine. The front tie rods are the broken ones. At the small southwestern-style Hurricane police station, a cop knocks on the chief's office door to tell him Maggie Myers is back. The chief looks annoyed, but tells him to send her in. The chief is Clay Burke, 55, red hair and a flat top, Carlton's dad. The cop sends in Maggie, a plain-looking woman in her 40s, the widow of the man in purple from the cold open. She asks Clay what he's doing to find Ralph, and he says he's doing what he can. She asks if he's raided Freddy's yet, and he says they're waiting on a warrant. She thinks they're actually waiting to ask for a warrant. Clay says she just has to trust the process, and Maggie says he's been missing for days. Clay suggests that maybe Ralph wasn't required to check in with his ex-wife. Maggie says Ralph hardly ever left town, and they'd never gone this long without talking, not since the first month of being divorced. She reminds Clay of what she'd already told him, that Ralph was scared of Freddy's, but felt like he couldn't leave. She says he always talked like there was something evil and inescapable in the restaurant. Clay looks like he knows something, and really doesn't want to talk about it. In a gas station, Charlie drops an armful of snacks on the counter and requests $20 on pump, 2. As she pulls out her wallet, she's startled by a furious-looking old white woman. "I know who you are," she says. "You're Henry Emily's daughter." Charlie tries to make a joke about her reputation preceding her, but the woman interrupts, growling that Henry Emily committed atrocities against Hurricane. Charlie is stunned, and the woman says she can still feel the souls of those killed by Henry's inventions. Charlie stammers that Cece's death was an accident, and the woman mockingly asks if she really thinks Cece was the only child to die because of Freddy's. Several customers and the one employee tell the woman to stop talking, but she tells Charlie if she ever wondered why her father really killed himself, it was because of the guilt of what his creations had done. Charlie tries to protest, weakly, but the old woman says Henry could have prevented decades of misery if only he hadn't been addicted to the joy of creation. The counter attendant yells at the old woman, and Charlie runs out, money still in hand. We now see that she was in the gas station attached to John's garage. Charlie gets in her car and starts it, backing up without looking, and slams into something. She turns around, surprised, and sees someone standing up in the rearview mirror. It's John. He waves to her, smiling like she didn't just almost run him over. He mouths something inaudible, and Charlie frowns at him, confused. A minute later, Charlie and John sit on a rocky ledge near the garage, sharing a bag of chips. John tells Charlie not to worry about the old woman, who he calls Granny Foster. She thinks she's some kind of clairvoyant. Charlie wonders if her father has always been the Hurricane Boogeyman, and John says it's less about Henry and more about Freddy's. The place was popular throughout Utah back in the day, and the animatronics were so advanced that people started making up conspiracy theories. John remembers hearing teenagers say that the animatronics were actually robots built by aliens, and kids on the playground saying they would come to life at night to kill people and stuff them inside empty animatronics. Charlie says those rumors probably started when Cece died. John asks if she remembers that, and Charlie says she remembers Cece and his siblings, but she doesn't necessarily remember when he died. Charlie admits she doesn't remember a lot of her childhood before leaving Hurricane. She just remembers her friends Marla, Carlton, and Jessica, though she doesn't necessarily remember any of their time together. John says Marla has been worried that Charlie would start obsessing about unanswered questions, and Charlie tells him that Marla doesn't know her anymore. John admits that he's always thought there was more than meets the eye at Freddy's. He would be happy to help her look, as long as she doesn't tell Marla. Charlie says she'll think about it, then asks him if anyone else has died at Freddy's, referencing what Granny Foster said. John says she shouldn't listen to Granny Foster. Charlie says a broken clock is right twice a day. John says accidents will happen, but no matter what, her father never meant to hurt anyone. Charlie says she doesn't need him to tell her that. She may not remember much, but she remembers her father, and she knows he was a good man. Phil knocks on Marla's door, and it's opened by Hannah Appleton. Before Phil can say anything, Hannah grabs him by his belt buckle and pulls him inside. We cut to Dottie, still vegging out in front of the TV, as the sound of bed springs grow louder from above. A minute later, Phil and Hannah collapse next to each other in Dottie's bed, PG-13 naked and sweating. Hannah says if someone could do that to Dottie, she'd probably come too. Phil asks if she ever feels bad about doing this, and Hannah says Dottie deserves it for how she was in high school. Besides, she says, Phil is one to talk, working at Freddy's. He reminds her that he doesn't know anything about what happened, but now that she mentions it, he has to make a phone call. He pulls on his boxers and heads out of the room. Back in the police station, Clay is on his way out. He tells the receptionist to take messages for his personal calls, unless it's his wife, then call him on the radio. The receptionist asks if he's on his way to the town hall, and Clay says no. Clay is stopped on his way out by a young deputy, Jay Dunn. 24, skinny, blonde, soft voice with a light southern accent. Jay asks Clay if he's cleared to take a late lunch break, and Clay says, once again, Jay isn't a fry cook. He doesn't need to ask permission to eat his lunch every day. Jay says, sure, he knows that. It's just that the other deputies assigned him to watch Chief Edison for the day, and Jay wanted to go down to Sparky's. Clay asks why Jay doesn't take Chief Edison to Sparky's. He could probably use some time out of the station. Jay reluctantly agrees, and just as Clay is leaving, Jay stops him again to ask if he's allowed to drive his cruiser to lunch. Clay says yes, obviously very patient with Jay, though that patience may be running a bit thin. Clay leaves and Jay goes to the break room where a very old man, former Hurricane Chief Edison, sits at the table eating Jell-O. Jay asks if he wants to go to Sparky's and get some lunch. Edison, only somewhat aware of what's going on, says he would rather have some gin. Jay says they might have gin at Sparky's, he isn't sure. Clay Burke enters Freddy's, passing Candy Cadet and entering the main restaurant, which is lifeless as usual. He heads for the kitchen, but stops when the curtain opens to reveal the headliner animatronics. They're just singing in their pre-programmed routine, but as Clay watches, Freddy turns to look directly at him, his eyebrows coming down into a glare. Clay narrows his eyes, and he and Freddy frown at each other for a long moment before Freddy's eyebrows move up again and his head turns. Maybe he was really glaring at Clay, or maybe that was a simple movement in his routine artificially lengthened due to a malfunction. Either way, Clay heads to the kitchen, leaning in the door and knocking on the wall. The only employee in there looks up. It's a kid in his early 20s, dyed black hair, black jeans, and a black polo shirt with the Freddy's logo and a stripe of black and white checkers. He has several piercings and bracelets. He's not exactly goth, but definitely goth adjacent. His name is Donnie. Clay asks if the manager's around. Donnie, who's in the middle of sticking a pair of frozen pizzas into the oven, says no. Is there a problem? Clay says no, he just wanted to ask him a few questions. Donnie says, okay. Clay asks if he's gonna serve those frozen pizzas. Donnie says it's not really worth using the whole kitchen, but the health inspector says it's fine. Was that his question? Clay says no, he wants to know when Phil Brooks will be back, and Donnie says probably never, since Donnie's here till close. Clay asks if Donnie knew a guy named Ralph Myers. Donnie looks at him suspiciously and says he's actually anti-authoritarianism, so Clay had better have a good reason to be here. Clay is not here to suffer fools, so he says it's off the record, he's just making conversation. Donnie says, yeah, right, like a cop would just go around asking employees about their coworker who disappeared without an ulterior motive. So you haven't heard from him, Clay says. Donnie realizes his mistake and tells Clay to get a warrant. Clay says he just wanted to chat with Phil, but it's fine, he knows where to find him. In the kitchen at Sparky's, someone is crying loudly. Norma, Marla, and the cook are organizing food and doing dishes, keeping up a casual conversation amidst the wailing and gnashing of teeth. Norma asks how long Charlie will be here, and Marla says she doesn't know. The cook says coming back to Hurricane after being out in the real world must be trippy, like Dorothy falling down the rabbit hole. At some point during this conversation, we see that the sobs are coming from another waitress, Delilah, who's sitting on the floor in the corner and crying into her hands, ignored by all. They're not even raising their voices. Marla says Dorothy didn't fall down the rabbit hole, that was Alice. The cook says, yeah, that's right. Dorothy went down the yellow brick road. Marla says that's not really the same. The cook says, why not? Wonderland was all a dream, and the wizard's powers were all bullshit. Norma says it doesn't matter, since Wonderland and Oz are both unattainable in Hurricane. If anything, Hurricane is a brigadoon, a town frozen in time, invisible to the outside world, just waiting for someone to stumble in and break the curse. Marla leaves the kitchen carrying food and water and deposits them at a booth occupied by a middle-aged Korean man named Lin Park. Lin wears an expensive suit and speaks with a slight accent. He asks Marla if Anna's here, and she says she can't tell customers which employees are where. Lin says, but it's his daughter. Marla says no, and we get the feeling she's being protective of this Ann person. Marla leaves before Lin can push the issue, taking off her apron as she rounds the bar, where we now see that Charlie is sitting drinking coffee. Charlie asks if Marla's ever heard of Starbucks. They have all kinds of crazy drinks made with coffee. Maybe Sparky should try doing that. Marla says maybe once Hurricane gets a second traffic light, they can get a Starbucks. Marla starts sorting her tips, and Charlie asks if she's off. Marla realizes her mistake. She didn't want Charlie to follow her home. She says yes, but she has to go home and deal with her mom. Charlie asks what happened to her mom, and Marla says she'll tell her later. The door rings and Jay Dunn enters, helping Chief Edison walk in at a snail's pace. Jay helps Edison onto a stool, then sits beside him. Marla says hi to Jay, saying Ann isn't here, and Jay says he knows, he just likes their food. Charlie is eyeing Jay, and Jay innocently says hi. Edison orders a gin. Jay says sorry, he keeps asking for gin. Edison says he'll take a Winston, too. Marla hands Jay a menu and a coffee. Charlie flags her down and asks if she wants to hang out later. Marla says she's not sure, she has a lot going on. Charlie asks what, implying that she doesn't think Marla has anything going on, and Marla replies sharply that even people who still live in Hurricane have stuff going on. Charlie says that's not what she meant, and Marla says she knows what she meant. Charlie reminds her that she didn't leave Hurricane on her own. Her mother took her away as a kid, and she still doesn't know why. Marla says that she remembers Ella Emily as a smart and upstanding woman who probably had the best intentions when she took Charlie away. Marla notices that Lynn is waving to her and pointing to Jay. Marla taps Jay on the shoulder and gestures to Lynn, who beckons him over. Jay walks over to Lynn's booth and Lynn tells him to sit down. Eating his lunch, Lynn says he's heard that Jay is dating his daughter. Norma comes out of the kitchen, and Marla tells her she's leaving. Edison pokes his head over the counter and tells Norma he'd like a T-bone. Norma says, okay, one T-bone coming right up. Overhearing, Charlie asks Marla if Norma's really going to give this ancient man a steak, and Marla says Norma has it covered. She'll probably give him a steak puree or something. Marla is now sitting on the stool next to Charlie, and Charlie asks if she's gonna hang out. Marla asks if she's staying with Aunt Jen, and Charlie says she decided to stay in the motel with Lamar. Marla asks why Charlie's really here, and Charlie gives her the same reasoning she gave Jen. Marla considers, but knows she can't ask about Freddy's in public. She decides to ask if Charlie's sure she didn't have any other reason for coming here, and Charlie asks what other reason could she have. Marla snatches Charlie's paper napkin, revealing the shoddy sketch of Chica the Hungry Chicken Charlie's been scratching onto it with a pen. Marla gives her a look. Charlie says sotto voce that Marla can't blame her. This is her family legacy here. Marla says there's nothing left of her father's work. She walks away, heading for the door, and Charlie says aloud, "We had some good times at Freddy's." Marla freezes, and all conversation in the diner stops. After a tense moment, Marla leaves through the front door and the conversations resume. Norma watches Charlie suspiciously. Charlie turns around and watches through the front windows as Marla gets into John's car and they drive off. Phil is talking on the phone in his underwear, very aware that Dottie is sitting somewhere behind him. He's telling the phone about Mike Schmidt. Yes, Schmidt, Schmidt. Yeah, he's from Colorado. Phil is pretty sure it doesn't mean anything. Hannah comes downstairs, fully clothed, and Phil shushes her. He says he'll keep an eye on Mike, then hangs up. Hannah asks who that was, and he says Jacob Murray. Hannah thinks he should leave work at work, and Phil says he's not hourly. Just then, they hear the door opening, and Phil dives under the dining room table, concealed by the tablecloth. Marla and John enter, still in their work uniforms, as Hannah assumes a position next to Dottie. Hannah looks surprised to see Marla, and Marla says she said she'd be home at 3. John lurks nearby. Marla notices that Hannah's shirt is inside out and opens the fridge. She asks Hannah why the food she left for her mom is still in there, and Hannah apologetically says Dottie knocked over her bowl of fruit, and Hannah assumed that meant she wasn't hungry. Suspicious, Marla tells Hannah that her mom has to eat. Phil watches this interaction through a hole in the tablecloth. He freezes in fear when John looks directly at him. John looks like he may have noticed Phil's eye, but if he did, he doesn't mention it. Marla is upstairs, changing into her civvies, obviously troubled. She looks out the back window, where she sees 2 little girls hiding behind a tree. One of them is Marla, in her late single digits. The other is a Hispanic girl named Jessica. The 2 girls wait as a third kid under 10 comes around the tree. Carlton. The girls jump out and scare Carlton, causing him to drop what he was carrying, an early 80s Viewmaster. After Carlton has recovered, he allows the girls to use his Viewmaster in turns. They're interrupted by the arrival of a 4th child from the house. Charlie. They don't look happy to see her. Charlie takes the Viewmaster and clicks through the slides, roughly, causing it to jam. She slaps the toy hard, despite Carlton's protests. Finally, she rips out the circle of slides, tearing the paper. Realizing her mistake, Charlie shrugs and hands the Viewmaster back to Carlton, who stares at it impotently while Marla shoves Charlie with one hand, defending Carlton's honor. Back upstairs, back in 1993, a young adult Marla considers this memory, then picks up her phone and dials. She addresses Carlton on the other end and tells him to meet her at the motel. They shouldn't have let Charlie out of their sight. A minute later, Marla and John leave the former's house, getting back into the latter's car. It's the early evening. John starts driving and asks Marla where they're going again. Marla says the motel outside town. John says, oh right, so she can hang out with, Charlie, Marla reminds him. John says, oh right. Marla hasn't missed the breezy, poorly acted way he addresses the Charlie problem. John asks when she'll need to be picked up, and she says it's fine, Carlton will give her a ride. John looks uneasy, and finally asks if there's something he should know about Charlie. Marla asks, is there something she should know about Charlie? He seemed to recognize her in the diner. John says she looked familiar, but all he knows is the stories. About Charlie, and about her father. Late that night, Mike Schmidt returns to Freddy's in his uniform, and Donnie lets him in. Before long, Mike is in the office, and the rest of the staff have departed. Settling into his rolling office chair, Mike finds a box of cassette tapes labeled Play Me Night 1 through Play Me Night 4. He pops the Night 1 tape into a handy tape player and sets it to rewind. As it does, he leans into the CCTV, frowning in consternation. On the main stage feed, Chica is looking directly at the camera. Surely she wasn't doing that a minute ago. Mike looks even closer and is suddenly startled by the sound of a ringing phone. Realizing it's coming from the tape, he laughs off his own paranoia.
Hello? Hello?
Says the cassette tape in the voice of the man we saw murdered, Ralph Myers.
I wanted to record a message for you to help you get settled in on your first night.
Mike listens to the tape for a minute, but when he happens to glance at the CCTV, he nearly falls out of his chair. Chica has disappeared from the stage. In Lamar's subpar motel room, Lamar, Charlie, Marla, and Carlton are hanging out, eating a pizza. Lamar has a bunch of diagrams and notes taped to the wall, and he's setting up a robotics question that we'll have to get someone else to write. With some prompting, Charlie answers his question almost correctly. Marla, knowing nothing about robotics, points out a simple logical inconsistency in Charlie's answer, Occam's razor, and Lamar says that's correct. Charlie claps for Marla and says she should really think about college. Marla says it's not that easy. No one really leaves Hurricane, at least no one who's still here after high school. Charlie suggests that it might be hard leaving her brother and parents, to which Marla agrees uncomfortably. It's awkward for a minute. Charlie doesn't know why. Then Carlton stands up and says he has to go. He's already blown the 30-minute guarantee. Charlie and Lamar don't get it. Marla realizes Carlton is on the clock for his pizza delivery job. She says she thought he just brought the pizza for them, and he says no, he stole it, and there's a whole stack of them in the car getting cold. Mike walks around Freddy's with a flashlight, clearly jumpy, but still able to hear Ralph's recorded voice from the other room. As Ralph explains the animatronic's night
Free roaming mode.
Mike turns a corner to see Bonnie standing in the hallway, looking menacing. Mike freezes, then turns and runs in the other direction, tiptoeing around the kitchen as Ralph mentions
The bite of 87.
an event where someone apparently lost their
Frontal lobe.
Mike sees Chica standing on the far end of the dining room, and Freddy's still on stage. They never seem to move when his flashlight is on them, and he debates how to proceed, but when Ralph mentions the frontal lobe thing, Mike hightails it back to the office and shuts the doors behind him by hitting the big red buttons. He checks the CCTVs and sees Bonnie and Chica standing in different locations, staring directly into the cameras. Just then, Ralph reminds him to
Close the doors only if absolutely necessary. Gotta conserve power.
Mike makes a sound of stress and psychs himself up, then presses both door buttons and runs out of the office. Carlton carries a pizza up the driveway to an ill-cared-for, single-story home, closer to a trailer than a house. He rings the doorbell. There's no response, so he tries again, then a third time. He tries knocking, and a man calls from inside, telling him to come in. Hesitantly, Carlton opens the door and enters a messy mudroom full of clothes, old books, and toys. The man calls for him to come further, and he does, entering a living room that's equally messy, except all the detritus has been pushed to the walls, leaving a clean area in the center with no rugs or furniture. The homeowner, a raggedy older man, is crouched in the middle of the room, his ear pressed to a metal pipe jammed through the floor. Confused, Carlton says he has his pizza. The man shushes him and points to the pipe. He's listening. After a moment of silence, the man gives up and stands up, saying he's starting to think they didn't follow him from his old house. Carlton says he has his pizza. The man says he didn't order a pizza. Carlton repeats his address, and he says that's right. It must have been him. The man calls for someone named Toto, hobbling out of the room. Carlton follows him, saying he just needs a 1993 pizza's worth of cash, but the man ignores him, still calling for Toto. Finally, he reaches into a pile of clothes and pulls out a yellow teddy bear wearing a purple top hat and bow tie like a miscolored Freddy Fazbear. The man asks the bear if he ordered a pizza, and when the bear doesn't reply, the man tosses him away. Carlton says he really just needs the money, but the man cuts him off by touching Carlton's face with both hands, squeezing his cheeks like a grandparent. He tells Carlton he has a noble face, the face of a lawman, or a Keebler elf. Carlton says, thanks? The man finds his wallet and starts counting out cash, complaining that Toto is always writing checks that his social security can't cash. He hands Carlton the money and takes the pizza, opening the box. He gasps in horror and says he didn't want pepperonis. Carlton says he's pretty sure he ordered a pepperoni pizza. The man says yes, but he specifically asked for the pepperonis to be taken off. Carlton says that would be a waste, and the man says he knows. Now he'll have to take them off himself, and he'll have to be the wasteful one. Almost apologetically, he says he's just trying to look out for the poor piggies who gave their lives for these pepperonis. Charlie checks the clock and says she's going out for more snacks. Marla says it's past midnight, nothing's open, and Charlie says she remembers a place, leaving quickly before they can argue. Lamar and Marla look at each other awkwardly, and Lamar suggests that Charlie isn't really going on a snack run. Marla agrees. Lamar says that probably means she's not really here for his research either. Marla asks if he knows why she's here, and Lamar says no, but it has something to do with Freddy Fazbear's. He mentions the memorial and suggests that the kid died at Freddy's. Marla confirms that the kid, Cece, was indeed killed in an animatronic malfunction. Lamar can't believe Freddy's is still open, and Marla says they've shut down and reopened and rebranded a bunch of times now. They're basically immortal. Lamar asks if Marla has any idea what Charlie's looking for, and Marla says she might. Lamar asks if she'll tell him, and Marla says no, for Charlie's sake and for his. Without bearing false witness against Charlie, she needs Lamar to know that she has every reason to suspect that Charlie's here with ulterior motives and that they may both be in danger. Lamar asks what the hell is so scary about a children's restaurant. Marla says Freddy's is only a symptom. Back in the Freddy's foyer, Mike sneaks around, waving his flashlight, but seeing no animatronics. He hears a metallic sound and dives for cover, hiding behind Candy Cadet. When he peeks up over Candy Cadet's head, he accidentally jostles the little robot, causing him to light up and start making noise. Mike fumbles to shut him up, but the robot starts reciting, "As I was walking to St. Ives." Mike scrambles to his feet, passing the front door, and freezes. Outside is the silhouette of a hooded figure, standing in the dark. Mike shines his flashlight through the glass, revealing Charlie, she's wearing her hoodie, not a dark cloak, who motions for him to let her in. He tries to wave her off, but she's insistent. Finally, Mike glances over his shoulder, then unlocks the door. Charlie tries to push past him, but he stops her. Mike asks what she wants, continuing to look over his shoulder. She says she needs answers to a few things, and he says she'll have to come back during the day. Or better yet, just call them. Freddy's phone number is probably on the World Wide Web. Charlie notices Mike's face and remarks that he looks familiar. When asked, he gives his name as Mike Schmidt, and she asks if he grew up in Hurricane. He says he didn't, but he knows all the rumors about Freddy's, and he won't help her break in. Charlie reveals herself to be the daughter of Henry Emily, the creator of the animatronics. Mike says the answer to his suicide isn't here, no matter what people in town say. Although Mike tells her to leave, the more he speaks, the more tempted Charlie is, until she offers to pay him to let her in. She only has $5. Mike gives her a word of warning. Don't look into the history of Freddy's and don't stir up trouble in Hurricane. He hears a movement behind him, quickly tells Charlie to leave town, and locks the door in her face. Charlie stays by the door, watching as Mike disappears and a figure emerges from the shadows. Chica. Chica pauses at the door, turning to stare directly at Charlie. Charlie stumbles back a little, and we cut to a sudden flashback. A 10-year-old Charlie in her garage, standing beside a man in plaid. Her father, Henry Emily. Henry is working on a robotic endoskeleton with pink eyes and 3 dowels sticking out of its head. Is that the new Chica? Charlie asks. Through this whole flashback, we stay directly at Charlie's eye level. It is, Henry replies. She's scary, Charlie says. Oh, that's not nice, Henry says. I'm sure if you were missing your outer layer, you'd look pretty freaky too. He wiggles his eyebrows at her. Charlie laughs. I think she'll be the prettiest animatronic in the whole world, she says, pivoting hard, as kids are wont to do. Oh, she'll be more than pretty, Henry tells her, and she'll be more than an animatronic. These new models will be able to move like real people. As long as they're connected to a power source, they can do just about anything. Henry almost seems to look at the camera as we cut back to present day, a battered and aging Chica narrowing her eyes at Charlie. Charlie stares back through the glass, and Chica finally moves on. A minute later, Charlie sits in her car, clearly distraught on a number of levels. She hears Granny Foster's voice asking if she really thinks Cece was the only child to die because of Freddy's. Charlie reaches into her bag and pulls out the purple rabbit, Theodore, holding him for a long moment and staring into his glassy eyes. She squeezes him tighter, activating a voice chip she forgot was there. Theodore lets out a very old, very slow, very creepy recording of Henry saying,
I love you, Charlotte.
We have a brief glimpse of a flashback. Henry, smiling at something out of frame, looking proud. A voiceover says, I love you, Charlotte, the way it was intended to sound. Back in the car, Charlie wipes away a tear, sets Theodore on the dashboard, and cranks the engine. Back at the motel, Lamar is futzing with the vending machine when Marla comes up beside him. He asks if she's heading out, and she says yeah. She doesn't think Charlie or Carlton will be back anytime soon, so she called John. She goes to leave, but Lamar says it would be easier to make sure Charlie's alright if he knew what was going on. Marla hesitates for a long moment, then decides to tell Lamar the truth. She explains that in 1985, 4 kids went missing from Hurricane and neighboring towns. Somehow, the cops connected the missing kids to Freddy's. The kidnapper was arrested, but the kids were never found. Lamar asks if Charlie is here to look into the disappearances, and Marla says based on today's interactions, she doesn't think Charlie even knows about it. Marla says regardless of the missing children incident, Charlie's father had a lot of baggage, hence the suicide, and it would be better for Charlie if she didn't go poking around his business. Marla and Aunt Jen would prefer Charlie to not know about the missing children incident, but now it's up to Lamar whether or not to tell her. She thinks he shouldn't. He should use this information as a motivator to get her out of town before she discovers something she doesn't want to know. But if he wants to tell her, she can't stop him. Marla can tell he's a good friend to Charlie, and she and Carlton don't even know her, not as adults. She cautions Lamar to remember that the truth can kill, and blissful ignorance can save lives. Lamar says she'll hear about it from someone in town, and Marla says no, Hurricane is very tight-lipped, especially where Freddy's is concerned. The missing children incident is an elephant in the room, which is probably why they're putting so much work into the memorial for Cece, hyper-focusing on the one kid whose death was cut and dry. Lamar says he can't not tell Charlie, and Marla accepts this, just as she accepts that she can't stop whatever Charlie is doing right now. Jen Emily is startled awake by a sound in her attic. She pulls a revolver out of her bedside table, dropping the leather holster and taking it upstairs. She startles the intruder, who turns out to be Charlie, sitting among a bunch of half-unpacked boxes. Jen snaps at her, saying she knew she had ulterior motives, and Charlie somberly asks what happened to her father. Caught off guard, Jen says he committed suicide 3 years ago, just like Charlie was told. We see that Charlie is staring at a candid photo of Henry working on an older animatronic. Charlie somberly asks why her parents didn't want her. Jen says that her brother was a genius, but in many ways he was stupid, blinded by his own genius. Henry wanted to build something in the present, and his partner William wanted to build a legacy, and both goals got in the way of their families. Charlie was set up for failure by her father, just as much as Cece Afton was. Charlie asks if Jen is saying she would have ended up like Cece if she'd stayed with her parents, and Jen doesn't know how to respond. Charlie then asks why Jen never adopted her. Jen softens, feeling guilty but not giving excuses, and tells Charlie she can stay, but only until after the memorial. She says that the real curse of Hurricane has nothing to do with Freddy's. The town itself latches onto its residents and never lets them leave. Jen says she'll grab Charlie some toiletries and pauses when she sees Charlie still staring at the photo of Henry. He really did love you, you know, Jen says. They both did. I know it feels like they abandoned you, but I promise that whatever they did was for your own good. Leaving me in foster care in a different state? Charlie asks. Committing suicide without even putting me in the will? I don't know why your father did what he did, Jen admits. And that's how it always was, since we were kids. But I spend enough time with you guys to know that being a parent can be confusing and painful. And sometimes you have to do things that your kids don't understand just because you're the adult and you know what's best in the long run. Your kids are going to resent you a lot of the time, but that's just part of the experience. Your father knew deep down that nothing he built would ever be as important as his kids, and I know he worked a lot, but at the end of the day, everything Henry did was for the sake of Charlie. Even when he spent a week straight with his nose in some damn robot, he knew that parenthood was the one true joy of creation. As Jen leaves, Charlie stares down at the photograph, and we cut ahead to later that night as Charlie sleeps fitfully in the lower bunk, Theodore propped up nearby. In her dream, Charlie walks up a cracked asphalt road in the desert, wearing her usual aviators, combat boots, and heart pendant. She pauses at a crossroads. A wider shot shows that she stands at the junction of two smaller roads, both paved, but the road perpendicular to Charlie's is much newer and less faded than the other, and overrides Charlie's road in the intersection. A dust storm kicks up in front of her, and when the cloud of sand parts, an animatronic sits in the middle of the crossroads. Another bear, just like Freddy, but in even worse shape, scrappy and torn up and missing an ear. This bear also wears a black top hat and black bow tie, but its fur is a yellow-gold color and it doesn't seem to have any mechanical parts inside. It's just the fabric and foam exterior, sitting down with its knees up and its arms hanging limp, its head cocked to one side. This golden Freddy sits there, unmoving, its eyes empty black holes. As Charlie watches, its head moves up slightly, its eye holes training on her, and two silver pinpricks of light appear in the empty sockets. Charlie stares at the empty suit, then glances behind her. There's nothing there, but when she looks back, the yellow bear is gone. Charlie looks down and sees, in the center of the crossroads, a canvas trunk with two leather straps and two padlocks. With a loud clang, one of the padlocks breaks open by itself, and we have a brief flash of white words on a black screen. It's me. After the first round of credits, we cut back to Freddy's, where Mike's watch strikes 6 a.m., playing a grandfather clock tone. Looking exhausted, Mike checks that all the animatronics are back in their places, then leaves the office, heading for the front door. As he passes an arcade cabinet, it activates, seemingly on its own. Mike doesn't notice, but we track in on the screen as it starts playing an 8-bit animation. A smiling purple sprite wearing a badge walks around the screen, touching 4 crying children and turning them into ghosts.